Good, go? Great. So welcome, everyone. My name is Kowalski. I'm the market director for PNC's corporate bank here in southeastern Michigan. Honored to be the moderator for today's first Motorbella Automobility panel. Our topic today is financing the future of mobility. I know we have a lot of folks from out of town. I promise you the weather in Detroit was 83 and sunny all weekend long. But that's meaningless because we've got 2 days of great discussion and a weekend full of excitement. So again, thank you for joining us. As you can imagine, the mobility startup arena is an incredibly competitive space. Competing for funding in this area, however, may be even more challenging than the products aside. This panel will be exploring the funding landscape for these startups in the current environment and how the landscape may evolve in coming years. So we have a terrific group of experts on our panel today. I'll briefly introduce each who will deliver comments, and then we'll have ability to have some Q&A following. So just as a side note, I saw my mom this weekend. She saw Jack, Fabian, Marco, and she said, "How the heck did you get on this panel?" And I reminded her that PNC wrote a giant check to be the presenting sponsor of Motorbella, and she said something that I thought was a great lead in for today, and it's money talks, son, money talks. So with that, let's talk money, let's talk mobility, let's talk Motown. So our first panelist, Fabian Koark. Fabian serves as the CEO of Invensity for the US market. He's the vice chair of the Global Automotive Mobility Innovation Challenge, or GAMIC, a well-regarded consultant on engineering projects and a prolific author. Fabian has advised on an impressive list of clients here in the US, Germany, and China. And with that said, let me introduce Fabian Koark.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words. It's great to be here. Motorbella, perfect. Outside, we from GAMIC, the Global Automotive Mobility Innovation Challenge, are so grateful to be invited here and be part of the program. In this fantastic panel with guests from across the country, I would say I represent the Motor City together with PNC. And yeah, I will talk a little bit about GAMIC, but I'm definitely coming for this panel from the problem side. The problem side of the funding of future mobility. So let's dive a little bit into it. So I have the easy fruits, the sweet fruits to digest. So I'm pretty sure that Marco will present a little bit more complex topics in a minute. So let's dive in. First of all, small announcement. Today this is a small panel, but we have a big announcement. Kickoff of the GAMIC Season 14 tomorrow in the event center, also broadcasted online and I think on the outside screen with some local startups that are also present here in the automobility environment. So let's jump in, and everybody who wants to have a little bit more information about GAMIC, it's an easy website, gamicevent.org. We'll not talk so much about that today. But let's talk about financing. And we always think that if there's a great idea, if there's a great innovation, funding will find its way. When we look into the data coming from the 90s until today, then we definitely have to ask ourselves the question, do we have enough funding, venture capital, risk capital to finance innovation available? And when you compare the venture capital investment over the timeline with its major peak in the 2000s, and compare that to the filed patents in the same timeline, then we see how innovation speed is increasing, not just in the mobility space, but also in the mobility space. Investment in high-risk technology works completely differently. It is depending on availability, and it's depending on perception of what the investors think about a certain technology, and the clear fact if free funding is available, and it's just attractive to invest into technology. And that's what we have to take into consideration. We saw a little bit dip, COVID, 2021, but we also have to prepare for the next economic downswing that I don't think we are seeing here, because we have now employment rates are up, and I think we are doing quite well even in this difficult situation last year. So, but we have to prepare. So what happens in the next major crash? How can we prepare the industry for enough funding for new innovation moving forward? And in mobility, let's dive a little bit in mobility. What we see on the right side is just an impulse that we see, wow, really, the US is leading the market in major mobility investment. These are numbers captured by Capital IQ and McKinsey. So what interesting here is, on the right side, that not every market attracts funding in the same way. And I asked the question, because I mean, you can hear my accent. So I'm born and raised in Germany. So I live in Detroit, Michigan now for 5 years. And I just came back from California. And so I definitely asked myself, what is Germany doing wrong? Because when we see the top line is like the companies, innovation companies in mobilities, they are seeking investment, and the amount of investment is fairly small. So it's definitely a mismatch. And then we can also ask ourselves the question, what is the US doing right? And how are different areas in the world able to attract risk funding, venture capital? And I have a personal opinion about that. It is very easy to start a company in the US. I go out there, I go online, I get a text number, I hire people, and I don't have all kinds of authority up my back that I have to secure jobs in the first 2 years of my enterprise. And I think this lack of risk, especially on the employment side, is very attractive for investors. Then we have to ask ourselves a second question. We see that on the left side. In the mobility space, we separate the trends into the case areas: connectivity, autonomy, shared mobility, and electrification. Now we know that electrification is important to, in the end, maybe save our planet. When we see that it's a little bit falling behind on the venture capital side, then we can ask ourselves the question, is it because we don't see enough innovation? And I think the press conferences during Motorbella this year will show differently, and we will have a few announcements in the field of electrification. But maybe the incentives are not right, or the perception of a potential profit in the field of electrification are not set right. And maybe we can talk about that in this panel today. And then we also see that venture capital investment is highly centralized. So that means there are hubs in the world and in the US that are able to fund high-risk future mobility technology and other areas and other metro areas and cities that are falling behind. And so we have some people also here in the room today and online and at the event at Motorbella that are coming from the policy side. And so we have to think about what should we support. And looking into the history of Silicon Valley and what happened there, it's a fairly simple recipe in my perspective. We need smart people, and it means we have to invest in schools. And that must be part of a public mobility funding strategy. And we have to invest in resources, and not just privately owned laboratories. We have to invest in laboratories that are available. And I think we made major steps forwards with the American Center for Mobility not far from here. And we have to give entrepreneurs a way to start a business easy. And that's why we have to support local accelerators, and also understand from a policy-making side and from a support side that there are different types of accelerators. There are accelerators that attract business to come into the community, and then there are accelerators that would like to pick up interesting entrepreneurs and startup people and collect them. And that has a different impact on the local ecosystem for funding. Yeah? And then we have to get things off the ground. So public-private partnerships to solve the major mobility challenge is definitely one of them. 2 words, and all what I said now gave the inventors of Gamik the motivation to start this, to do a local accelerator program that invites the world to Metro Detroit, provides them a bridge between a new technology company and an industry company. Gamik's way to financing is not to provide investors directly, but to connect innovators to big corporations, get them under an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, under collaboration agreement, and get the proof of concept. And do a few other things, and do competitions and get exposure. But I don't want to talk about, when you go on the website, you will see some of the past competitors and how they scaled over time. But to make it very simple, what is an organization like Gamik, and why is Gamik a non-profit organization? All the organizers from Gamik have a day job. We are not getting paid. We do this for fun because we believe this is a social investment into the future of mobility. And that's why we are active in this very, very difficult pre-seed stage that no one is supporting sufficiently. And that's where we're active, and we're collaborating with MEDC in that when we compare that to other accelerators that are well known, like Plug and Play, they're starting way later when there's already revenue and customer base existing. So we have to understand the different challenges along the roadmap of a mobility startup to really make a difference and provide a foundation for the future of mobility. That's all from my side for now.
Thank you, Fabian. I like the FFF, Friends, Family, and Fools. I'm just not sure which one I fall into there. But should make for some lively conversation later. So our next panelist, Jack McCauley, inventor in residence at Jacobs Institute of Design and Innovation at UC Berkeley in engineering. He's an American engineer, a car expert, an inventor, hardware designer, gamer, and philanthropist. He is best known as a co-founder and former chief engineer at Oculus VR, a pioneering company in the field of virtual reality, which was acquired by Facebook for $2.3 billion in 2014. Jack is also known for his work on designing guitar and drum interface for the 2005 cultural phenomenon, the Guitar Hero video game series, and is credited for inventing the first scrolling feature on the computer mouse. Jack, you've accomplished a lot more than I have in a period of time. I can barely change the oil on my gas lawnmower. But with that said, Jack, please join the stage.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Jack McCauley, and I'm an entrepreneur is what I am. So I've done that my whole career. I do really risky things. Got a train in the background. And one of the things that I did that's risky is I used to race motorcycles, and I love vehicles of all types. I love cars. If I hadn't had my roots in California, I'd probably be in the automotive business. And when I graduated from college, that's what I wanted to do. I worked in gaming, I was a programmer, and there was no car companies that would be interested in my skill set where I lived. Now there's Tesla. Tesla's about 25 minutes from my house. They're out there. I was out there about a month ago checking it out. They took over a car plant near me. So the topic today is funding for hardware, and I know this is about vehicles, but I'm going to talk about that in general because we had to go through this at Oculus, is how to get money from people, venture capital people and investors, when you have high capitalization cost, to capitalize, for instance, Guitar Hero, which is where I worked. I built their guitars for them, designed and built their guitars. We had a very small company with no money, and we were looking at potentially very large orders with no capital to produce the plastic pieces. The game is pretty easy to produce. You find a publisher, he goes to the plant, and back then it was all on DVDs and CD-ROMs, and they run the printing press and they distribute them. So it's kind of pretty easy, but for hardware it's very difficult. And I have a picture here of Brad Bau's Lime. Brad is the CEO, or was the CEO of Lime Bikes. I've had this discussion with him because I know from my own experience how difficult it is to get funding for hardware. And so with Oculus, here's what we did. First of all, we had a great CEO. I was not the CEO, I was a head engineer, who had 2 previous exits, which were very successful. He sold his first company to Autodesk, which was on the board back here. The second company he had, which he's had 2 exits now, we had one very good exit in Oculus, of course. He already knew how to pitch the company and sell it. But the problem we had was startup cost. Friends, family, and fools, I saw that on the slide deck there. I had to chuckle because I'm that fool. I had to go home and I had to put skin in the game. You have to put your own money in it if you're a co-founder, if you have it. A lot of the guys there didn't have any money. They were young guys, right? One guy's 19, he didn't really have any money, but so the other people had to get the money together. And the VC people want to see this. They want to know that you're so committed and so committed to what you're doing that you're willing to risk your own stuff because they're going to risk their stuff. So interestingly enough, I had to go home to my wife and I said, guess what, I'm going to do it again. And she goes, oh no, don't, please don't do that. And I went in and got my own bank account and gave money into a fund to fund Oculus. And my portion of that was smaller than other people's, but I did put a lot of money into it. I went to my sister, my brother, relatives, a nephew who was like in his early 20s, and they all pitched in. The nephew just got out of the army, he was in Iraq, so he had all his savings and put that in there. So. And the venture capitalists want to see that. Now you're looking at a production cost, the manufacturer cost is $100 million. Where are we going to get $100 million? Well, once we got skin in the game, I went and Brendan, who was the boss at the time, went out and started showing this thing. And the boss is the best salesman in the world. He's really good at selling stuff. He got an introduction to a guy at Andreessen Horowitz, which is a venture capital company, went in and he targeted the guy to show it to because the guy was a hardcore gamer. We are all pretty much, I don't play video games that much anymore, but pretty much everybody at the company was, and targeted that guy and went in and sold Oculus to them. Without Brendan, who was the boss, doing this, we wouldn't have gotten any money. So that's the story. We still had to come up with a production cost, $100 million. We got skin. The skin in the game was about 20 million, and then there was an additional 75 million supplied by Andreessen Horowitz. Barely put us over the curve. The interesting thing is that at Oculus, we actually made money. First launch of our developer kit, we were actually doing pretty well. I was surprised by that because normally hardware, and I've been involved with this for a long time, is losing money really badly in the first couple years. So that's me. He's kind of covered that. I'm going to get through this. Oh, I work at UC Berkeley. That's my alma mater, class of '86. I built a center there with Paul Jacobs of Qualcomm, and it's a makerspace. So this allows students. Berkeley's a theory school, right? These are like egghead theorist people, and we wanted to like disrupt engineering education. And so we built a makerspace there, and I funded that with Paul Jacobs and some other generous donors. And the idea is like the best engineers I had working for me, the college degree part is great, but the best engineers I had working for me were hands-on people who had been doing it their whole life. Those are the guys that's the kind of guy I'd like to hire. Like, he's very, very passionate about and interested in it. And most people in video games work in that business. It doesn't pay real well. It's not high, you're not working for Apple, you're kind of working for a game studio. So they're just passionate about it. And so the idea behind Jacobs Institute is to be able to give these people hands-on experience and experiential learning, which is touching and feeling and building things. And so there's 3D printers and stuff like that. So I worked in entertainment basically my whole career and had a lot of success, not just because of me, but because of all the people around me that supported me. Okay, I've alluded to the high cost part, and I know the Lime bike guys, and I also know some other mobility people that this is a recent thing. I didn't work in that industry. I just decided to go out and try to fish around and see who I could meet. And I got a common thread going there, and I alluded to this as the high cost of capitalizing it. And I'm talking to these people, I'm going, like, they all kind of like got their money from China somehow or some funny thing, or they got funding through a third party. Not too much interest in, you know, venture capital in them because of its hardware, and it's tough. It's just really brutally risky and expensive. And I will talk about that business model because I thought it was very creative. And again, it wasn't really my idea, but they were a startup company and they're doing pretty well. They were on, they were on that invention show on, what's it called? It's one of the television shows. That's how I saw them. I saw them on there and I go, hey, I want to go meet those guys. So I got together and met with them. And they basically kind of self-funded the thing. It's a husband and wife running it, and it's doing really well. They've got some interest in buying the company now. But they struggled for 5 years. I mean, it's a difficult thing. But what they decided to do was to build the hardware and lease it. And you get two benefits of that, is that you get sustainable revenue coming in from the lease payments. You get you send it to the surf shop or whatever it is out on the boardwalk at the beach, buys their stuff. They give it to them, they lease it back, and they get a portion of the revenue from the rental. So that's the business model that they created. Now, I still don't know if they're actually still doing that, but that was what they were doing, and I think that worked pretty well for them. And it's a very competitive business. For instance, I would not do a startup mobility company to do what Lime is doing because I could never get caught up to where they are. They have the app, they have the GPS on the bikes for billing and so forth. All that infrastructure is all built. If I were to do a mobility company, I would focus on software, some aspect of that I could turn the company and flip it and sell it, maybe to the people you're selling the software to. So for instance, you write the GPS mapping application or the billing app for them, and then you let them have it and eventually hope that they buy you or something like that. That's what I would be doing. Or maybe some control algorithm in the scooter or the roller skates, or excuse me, the skateboard or something else that you're going to do. So I mentioned this here, the infrastructure associated with billing and vehicle tracking. This is the part that they struggled with. They're not a software company. This is the husband and wife team again. They're a scooter company. Is how do they put all these pieces together with an app and all this on their phone? They managed to do it. And very similar to the way I mentioned, they basically had purchased assets in various places and put them together, and the software engineers put this stuff into the product. And it was a lot of competition. So they didn't try to compete with Lime bikes. They didn't. They just found out a business model that seemed to be a good idea and good work. The best part about leasing, I'm thinking about the laws in the United States, is you get to depreciate the asset. So it's like you sold it twice. First of all, you're renting it out, you're selling it to them in small payments, but then you can just depreciate it from your taxes, so that goes against your revenue. Your revenue's coming in, the asset's decaying in value because it's appreciating, you can deduct that. So they got a pretty good supply of cash flow for doing that. Now, the supply chain is challenging, especially when you know that a lot of the parts are coming. This is what the automotive manufacturers are faced with. We tried to get some parts quoted. They're out 37 weeks to get just chips to run a car. They're way out, and this is the problem, is that you might be tagged, if you're buying motors from one particular company, let's say, or they're making them for you, if there's some hiccup in their supply chain, or maybe they have a business problem, or the financial problems, you're kind of tagged to them. And the batteries, for instance, are challenging. The lithium-ion batteries they're expensive, and they're kind of like, there's a couple companies that make them. It's not like everyone's making them. The good ones are made by a couple companies. So if you want to buy a Samsung battery, for instance, because you know it's going to work well. The other ones are from other companies, like in China, aren't as good. So I think these are the challenges facing hardware, particularly financing. If you can't get funding In the case of Guitar Hero, what we ended up doing is we had to sell the company to get enough money to make the product. Does that make sense? We got $100 million for the company. Everyone did great. But then that gave us just enough revenue to produce the product. And so it's kind of challenging. The founders and so forth were paid with stock options, but Activision purchased our company. It's a big publisher. We got stock options and stuff like that, but the actual production and stuff we had to figure that out on our own. And that was very difficult because you're looking, we had 64 million pieces. That's what we sold over the lifetime of the product. It's just a huge amount of money. And they cost $8 a piece. So you're looking at what, $250 million in hardware, and very difficult to find people to finance that, and it's risky. So I just mentioned the renewable revenue model. This is the one that this company chose to use, and they have been successful. And I've gotten to know them really well. Met them, I sought them out, met them, and got to know them really well, and I kind of, they've been working with us a little bit to try to build prototypes and things like that. Not at UC Berkeley, but at I have my own facility, R&D facility that I run with staff and all that, helping them out. So, you know, going to venture capital and trying to get VC, if you have money and if you're young and you're doing a startup, you probably don't have a lot of money. But if you can go to your family and whoever you want to gather the funds together. Incidentally, on Oculus, my nephew, I mentioned the guy that was in Iraq, all of a sudden he's ultra wealthy. I'm going, that's not good. I should have not just given him a cash lump. I was going to people, what should I do? It's a lot of money to give a 25-year-old guy. He's like who knows what he's going to do? Buy a jet or something? And we were like going back and forth. What do I just give him payments? And everybody said, nah, just give him everything up front. Give him it's his. He earned it. So my nephew, my sister, all of my family members did really well. That doesn't happen very often. Most of the time the money's lost and then there's problems, right? The families, yeah, you lost all my money. So that didn't happen in this case. So, friends and family, that's a good way to go. And so we were kind of running out of time here, folks. So that's kind of what I'd done before. And in the case of the mobility and hardware, if you can figure out another model which doesn't require such an amount of revenue, cash flow, then you're in good shape. So high cost of goods, and I think I'm about out of time. Is that correct? Yes. All right. Well, thank you.
Just out of time on the prepared remarks. We just want to keep a couple for Q&A. Thank you, Jack, very much. So our final panelist, Marco Marinucci. Marco is a co-founder and lead partner at Hella Ventures, a multi-stage venture capital fund focused on mobility, deep tech, industrial manufacturing, and investments. Hella's clients include OEMs across the globe. Hella's a leader in LiDAR and radar technology, which are key components in self-driving cars. Prior to Hella, Marco ran automotive D&D and manufacturing programs in both Germany and Detroit. So with that, please welcome to the podium, Marco.
Thank you. Well, this was supposed to be a panel. I think it became a lecture. Is everybody still awake? Yeah, I see a few people a little bit tired. Oh, okay, it's early. All right, I'll keep it short. What do? We are a venture capital firm. Relatively easy. We take money from other people, put it into startups. In this case, it's only one company that we take money from right now. It's Hella. We have done, you can read the numbers yourself, about 29 investments. The most important part is that our investments turn into proof of concept projects, which then turn into commercial partnerships with Hella, and then joint product development. And we just have heard, which by the way I completely disagree with, it's not hard anymore to raise capital for a hard tech company. And when you go into mobility, going into software only, that's, in my opinion, if you paid attention to the last 2 years, the SPAC boom of the last 12 months, it's kind of like the past, to be honest. So it's hardware and software that is hot. Deep tech is going through a revolution now, and the biggest role that in deep tech we can play is effectively, yes, it is expensive to build hardware. Yes, it is hard to build up a supply chain. However, that's the place where corporates can come in. Corporates with established environments established, manufacturing lines, established supply chains. That's where corporates can gain access to innovation and startups effectively inventing things that haven't been there before. We as a fund, I don't want to bore you with our numbers, you can read them for yourself, but that's what we focus on as a corporate venture fund, is to bring our corporate in where the startups struggle, which is qualification, quality, testing, supply chain. Volume beats everything when it comes to purchasing parts for hardware. So let me give you two examples. Most recently, we had a nice event in New York City celebrating a NASDAQ debut of our LiDAR company, AI. We invested about 3 years ago. And alongside with world-class investors, why did they want Hella Ventures be part of this round? Exactly for the reasons I just mentioned. We brought in things that weren't there, or they are too expensive, they're CapEx heavy. When people graduate from Berkeley or from Stanford, they typically don't say, I want to be a functional safety engineer. They don't want to be a testing engineer. They want to do cool stuff. But unfortunately, when we put the car on the street, it needs to function. It needs to function for 15 years, and it needs to be safe. And that's where the corporates can come in and take over that part of the chain. We use venture capital effectively as a tool, and we try to do it in a way that returns some money so that we can finance the future as well. Then the second part is coming to things that cost a lot of money to build. The industry has been talking for the past 10, 15 years about digital car data marketplaces. Nobody has done it. 2 startups have done it. One is Wejo, our portfolio company, and the other one is direct competitor of Autonomo. Also, tremendous respect for our competitors. And what have they done? They have raised over $100 million to build something that nobody in the industry was able to build. What are we doing? What has GM been doing? They partnered with those companies, invested in those companies, and effectively bring the benefit to the end customer. And that's ultimately the best thing we can do. Combine innovation with our established companies and bring innovation to our society. With that, I would say let's start the panel, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Marco. So we have a few pre-submitted questions, but we'd really love to hear from the audience, much more important. So I'll get the ball rolling, but raise your hand and I can bring the mic to anybody in the audience for questions on anyone in particular or the entire panel. So just for everybody on the panel, there's been a ton of conversation the last couple of years about SPACs. Like everyone's doing SPAC, and then we've seen these ebbs and flows in the marketplace. So in your perspective, and please whoever wants to take this, Marco, I don't know if you want to start, but there's SPAC still a viable way for automotive and mobility technology startup financing?
There have been a viable way, as everybody saw probably in the media. We've had a few hiccups, of course, and everybody saw those hiccups as well. But I think ultimately the fundamentals that are behind that movement are a thirst for innovative companies, a thirst for coming in at a stage where the company is not worth $50 billion, coming to the public market. We've had way more public companies in the past, even in the 70s or 60s, than today. And so I think nothing is wrong with that, but it's simply for hard tech, for deep tech, it takes more money, it takes more time. And Silicon Valley has learned that, by the way. They've learned that it takes more time than they thought it would take. But it needs the public market and the resources of the public market to develop these things. So I think we have seen a way that how the public market can finance hard tech, deep tech, mobility, and that's here to stay. And the beauty that we see with SPACs, even though SPACs are pulling back now, the funding rounds, private funding rounds, they're getting bigger because they know even without $200, $300 million in revenue, there is a way to exit for the investors. And if investors can make money, they will put money into those companies. And that's good in the end for society because that's technology that we all need. We need self-driving cars. And there's no other way to fund it because it's just going to take more time than we think.
Jack or Fabian?
I mirror that, Marco. So, and you said it before, I think the atmosphere to fund hardware and to fund material and elements and electronics that are very expensive to build up from a production perspective, from a reliability perspective, from a safety perspective, that needs enough funding. And you can just attract the initial high-risk investors if there is an exit strategy. And I think we need to promote SPACs. We need to promote that they are successful and that they are as big as possible. And yes, every investment in a tech company, it's an investment in belief. And we have to disencourage a little bit the media to say, oh, these people promised something and that's why they raised a lot of money. So this is the tech world, and it takes time. And everybody who invests, for example, in a commercial Class 8 semi-truck business and do not understand the normal life cycle, engineering life cycle of almost 7 to 8 years to bring a vehicle to the market is just not informed enough. So that means a little bit the question is when we talk about stock options, that is their own risk class. Not everybody, not every little investor, not every Bob and not every Sandy that goes to Comerica Park or to PNC will be immediately advised to invest in stock options. So maybe SPACs is a little bit a high risk investment, and not everyone there should be a disclosure, kind of say, here, this is a risk investment. But other than that, there are a lot of people out there in the world that are willing to take the risk, and we have to promote it.
Yeah, I met with Henrik Fisker from Fisker Automotive. It's about a year ago. It's a pre-COVID meeting, and he's has a new vehicle coming out called the Ocean, and the meeting was I suppose it was about to see if I would invest in his company, and I got into a discussion. It's like, well, you got really high cost. You have to fund a factory. You've got to robotically controlled machines. You've got the machine to wind the motor, the electronics, those set outside source circuit boards and so forth like that. And he seemed to have an answer, somewhat satisfactory answer about all those things. And then he says, when you buy a car, the people care about the appearance of the car. The way the car looks is very important. Like, you wouldn't want to make the Chevy Bolt, which is an EV, I've got one of those, look like a Ferrari, because no one would buy it. It's got to look right. And he's a car designer, so he would know. He said that, automotive manufacturers, let's say Volkswagen, for instance, would be interested in building a platform, an electric vehicle platform, that other manufacturers can then stick their body on. And I thought that was a great idea. I think that's where he was headed. I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to him since before COVID happened. So I guess my point is like, he's kind of figured out how to get funding for a very, very expensive venture. How he did that, because he's good at selling things. He's a nice guy too. Henrik's a good guy. He's really good at selling things and getting really to a successful pitch. And I will say with one caveat on funding of hardware, and that's this: it has to have a renewable revenue stream to be attractive. So if I'm going to invest in a hardware company, I've got to see like reoccurring revenue from it. And the iPhone, of course, is a great example. It's a little thing with a glass screen and a processor in it and memory and all that stuff, but it does generate cash flow. There's a lot of services that are available that you pay for that Apple gets a little slice of. If it doesn't have, video games have reoccurring revenue. When you make a video game console, you make money on it because every time someone writes a game for it, they license it. You have to get the license, and they pay revenue for that. So it has to be reoccurring revenue to be attractive. I wouldn't say all hardware is not going to be funding. That's not true. You just have to carefully structure it, like we did, I think, at Oculus, pretty much. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. Any questions from the audience, or I'll continue with the one?
Talk really close. Okay. Hi, my name is Linnea. I'm with Sunburg for our product innovation studio in Detroit. I wanted to ask what Are you guys focusing more so on hardware technology acquisition through startups and venture capital, or are you looking more at software? And then can you speak a little bit more to the details of Marco, especially you had mentioned we come in where startups tend to have difficulty. Can you speak more to the details of what those difficulties are?
The second part of the question again? Sorry.
When you had said that Hella comes in to help startups
Okay.
where they
So
have
the first question is if we focus more on hardware or more on software. And the second question is what are the difficulties that some companies have where corporates can help? Well, so we focus on both. Software mainly when it comes to certain software products, for example, cloud-based software products, AI, machine learning. These are all things that, from my experience, having been in Europe, Detroit, and Silicon Valley, is just something Silicon Valley is pretty advanced at. And so we'll see more innovation there, and we'll invest in companies like that. Hardware, there's been a lot of innovation coming from other industries. Like when you look at radar technologies that are being developed these days, or LiDAR technologies being developed, they often come from the military or from other industries ported over to automotive. The difficulties, they're not real difficulties, they're more a funding problem. So effectively, if you have to build up your own manufacturing line, you have to build up your own supply chain, you have to build up engineering for functional safety and all that stuff, it's going to cost 3 times more. And in the end, the product that is going to be delivered is the same product as if a established corporate would simply help you. And so, coming to his point, effectively, the margins are much higher if you sell a license instead of if you try to sell directly to an OEM a piece of hardware, because they'll squeeze you. And so those are the difficulties, and that's throughout deep tech. It's going to be like that, and that's why that's where corporates can win. That's where corporates and deep tech have a reason to, of hope. No, I mean, like, didn't work for Kodak, but that's consumer. It's different.
I will make an additional comment on this challenge for startups. I think that in every stage of the innovation process, I think not so much in the idea, because you have founders that are very passionate and know what they are doing. But then when you go into this product, and it starts with, by the way, this is a fantastic, we have the sound of the, I think diesel-powered train.
Closer.
Is it off?
No, just closer then.
Closer. With the sound of the diesel-powered train in our background. So that gives us a good idea of the biggest advantage of electrified train systems in the US, and we would hear nothing. But back to your question. The first point is kind of a mission-based innovation system. And a classic engineer, a classic innovator have never learned this, is that I want to go full scope in the big scale market. Sometimes the license topic is an interesting idea, but you need a fast way to enter a market. And sometimes, and Mobileye has shown that, is that if you have a very complex technology, you bring it faster to the market in an aftermarket environment, because then you can sell it to an end customer, to a fleet customer, and you don't have to go all the way over OEM and purchasing departments and have to convince them of a piece price. So, and I think this is something where accelerators and venture capital, corporate venture capital companies play a big role to give advice. Hey, dear inventor, what you think is great, but you need to show first revenue in 18 months. And the big scale production process will not lead you to that goal.
We do have a question up front.
Run.
Hi, my name is Sandy Monroe. I have a question that has always totally stumped me. I am not a finance guy at all. Just ask my associates. But I'm kind of confused. I don't understand how Fisker could get a nickel, let alone the billions of dollars, because of all these different. When I don't, again, I'm not in your business, but how do you make decisions based on past failures. If you're an engineer, you can be successful 1,000 times, lose once, and you're out. No one will ever hire you again. With finance, it seems like the same guys come to the surface, they screw up, cost people like their life savings in some cases, and then they do it again and they get in. I don't understand it. Can any of you guys explain that to me? I'd really be curious as to that.
Thank you. That's a good point, but there were people who invested in Tesla, and I think that worked out pretty well for them. The thing is, you never know. Henrik's history is a little checkered and probably in automotive stuff. I liked his car. I liked the original car he did. I thought it was beautiful, the styling and so forth, and innovative. The solar panel on the roof. It's just very difficult to convince people to buy those things. I mean, if you're a Chevy guy, I'm kind of a Chevy guy. I'm always going to buy a Chevy. Kind of maybe once in a while I'll buy something other brand. It's difficult to get people to switch brands. I'm telling you, I know some people that were early investors in Tesla did really well. It's just very, very risky. Henrik is also great at selling things. You learn this in your job as a CEO, that you have to be part salesman, because you have to convince people to believe in what you're doing and your leadership. And so he's able to get people to do that. My predictions were with Tesla. I'm not an automotive investor. Were dire. I thought they would last a couple of years. They wouldn't sell any cars. I was dead wrong. They sold 295,000 vehicles last year. Now that's small compared to Chevy and Ford and Chrysler. So it's not a very big, or Toyota even. But it is substantial that there is a market for it. I seem to see those things all over San Francisco. Tesla's everywhere. Haven't seen any in Detroit, so yeah.
Maybe I can say a word to that, sir. Good point. It's the same clowns, different circus, all over again, all the time. Why is that? The crazy part is some venture capital firms actually, that's actually a good point. Some of the best founders are the ones that failed once or twice marginally. They did one or two little things wrong. Not talking about fraud. Fraud is a whole different topic. And we have some of those where I would say that's actually fraudulent and they get another shot. But the truth is, if you failed once marginally, there's a good chance next time you won't overlook something. You've learned your lesson. The other function, the other thing is a function of there's a lot of capital in the market and not so many people starting those companies. And in these close ecosystems like Silicon Valley, known people have always a better chance than new people. That's just how the human nature, I guess, works, and the dynamics of an ecosystem. But those are the fundamentals why it's often, I like to say, same clowns, different circus, and people get another shot.
One additional comment to that, and I agree to that. Every investment is not just an investment in a product idea or in technology, it's an investment in the people. And if an organization failed and they can still show retention of their people, that shows also that they increase their capability. In my day job, I do technology consulting, I do M&A, so buyer side advisory. And in that field, it is crucial that you see that you go through the history of a company, of a tech company, and what they have done in the last 5 years and where they have failed. Where a major product, for example, in the whole battery field, to get the highest performance, the highest capacity out of these high voltage propulsion batteries, you have to go to the boundary of what is possible from a physics perspective. And at means in large scale production it can fail, but in the moment you have that moment, you see this barrier material, large scale production did not work. Then you're the only one in the market who has that knowledge, and that can increase the value of your company tremendously.
Well, I think we're out of time for questions. If there's additional ones, I'm sure the panelists, if possible, will stay back to maybe address those individually. But yeah, I just want to thank Marco, Fabian, Jack for a great, lively conversation. Appreciate all the audience participation. There's a ton of great panelists coming up today and throughout tomorrow. I think some of our panelists here will be on additional panels. But thank you on behalf of PNC Bank, Motorbella, and these three fine gentlemen.